We take a trip back in time now to Stone Mills, Jefferson County, when agriculture in the mid-1800s was much different. Historians continue to work to preserve history so that the community can remain in touch with their roots. Producer Eric Cleary has more.
A few miles outside of Lafargeville, in Jefferson County, New York, lies the hamlet of Stone Mills. First settled in 1806, the land was originally part of Pennant Square, a 100-square-mile tract of land acquired by Peter Pennant in 1788 from the Oneida Indians. The first settlers were drawn to the area by the nearby creek and the availability of the land. Timothy Beatty, a resident of Stone Mills and history aficionado, spoke to us recently about the history of the area.
The first settler to this area was a man named Robert Frazier. He came in 1806. He actually settled about 1.5 miles, slightly northeast of Stone Mills. The following year, 1807, Peter Pratt settled in the town. The first settlers were farmers, generally, but they also did a lot with the forestry. They cut trees and made a charcoal kind of that they called potash. So that was a form of income for them until they could establish more people with other talents and skills, which eventually followed because of the creek here that provided water power. And so then blacksmiths, stonemasons, and cheesemakers and folks with those kind of skill sets followed. Well, life was pretty much, you had to be self-reliant for the early settlers, you know, like Peter Pratt. They had to produce their own food. The closest towns, you know, would have been back to Brownville and Watertown to get goods, and it was quite a distance to travel in one day to do that. So it was a laborious process to you know, have their own garden and tend to the animals, and also to do the clearing of the land, to cut the trees. So it was a lot more laborious than we're used to today. Well, the town developed quite a bit from 1807 when Peter Pratt came. In 1820, Peter Pratt and J.B. Collins built the first grist mill. But at the same time that Stone Mills was developing, other towns were starting to develop. And Lafargeville, 6 miles down the road, was developing a little bit faster because the railway went through there. So there was a more convenient spot for transportation, not only of people going places, but for the goods that farms were producing, or the loggers, the logs that they were cutting. Stone Mills area reached kind of a plateau and didn't continue, you know, developing or adding greatly to the population.
Formed in the 1960s, the Northern New York Agricultural and Historical Society, located in Stone Mills, focuses on the preservation of agriculture as it was in the 1850s. In addition to the diverse agricultural artifacts on display, there is also an old one-room schoolhouse, sawmill, and stone church on the premises.
The official name is Northern New York Agricultural and Historical Society, and you know, sometime in the 60s, I can't remember exactly when, they acquired the property and started trying to restore it, and centered their theme around agriculture as it was in the 1850s. And so they've been adding to the collection of things that they had at that time, and have worked mostly through volunteers to house things, to maintain them, and to set up displays. And they've worked quite a lot with different historical societies in order to capitalize on some of the ways they've done, and some of the grants and avenues they've used to help finance the expense to undertake all of these particular things. As the museum grew into the 70s, They started trying to hold events on the weekends when people had time off from work to focus on a particular theme. They had, like you mentioned, a strawberry festival. They had a craft fair that grew to over 150 vendors at one point, and then over time that's scaled back because there's so many competition for other craft fairs in the area that it's hard for the public to keep running to all of them. And during the week they were open for educational things, and one of the things they did in the spring was they offered what they called the Farmer Boys Days. And there they invited school districts to bring children out, and they would have volunteers dressed in period costumes demonstrating like bread making and the well. They'd take them over there and show them how the well worked in the windmill and how they got that water up. And the sawmill, showing how a sawmill looked and what rough cut lumber appeared and what involved in producing wood back in the day, and also the various machinery that farmers used. They would tour them through and show them those implements so that they could have a better understanding of the way people struggled with producing something to generate some income.
Currently, the museum has reopened and is holding events again after being closed in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. For more information about the museum and the events being held, visit stonemillsmuseum.org. In Stone Mills for WPBS Weekly, I'm Eric Cleary.